You guys haven't even got that cage off yet?
At the beginning of the movie, we see a guy named Ted Gray saying goodbye to his fiancée Gwen and heading off to an internship in another city. Ted is the top graduate from Harvard Medical School. He's studying forensic pathology, the branch of pathology that determines cause of death based on body examination or autopsy. Upon arriving at the medical center for the most prestigious internship program, Ted meets a naive kid named Ben. He shows the newbie around the workplace, and Ted notices the far from friendly attitude from the other students right away. Then Ted meets Dr. Morris, an experienced doctor who's already heard about Ted's stellar reputation. After the lecture, Morris introduces the newbie to Jake, who, as the doctor notes, is one of the smartest students and even occasionally helps the FBI crack complicated murder cases. But soon after, when the interns get an assignment to explain a person's cause of death, Ted stands out from the crowd and gives the correct diagnosis, immediately drawing attention and turning the whole group against him. Ted himself doesn't want to compete with anyone. He's just doing his job and wants to focus on building a career as the best forensic pathologist. The next day, Ted shows off his skills again and is the first to pierce the back of the corpse's neck to sever the nerve connections. Ben is impressed by Ted's intellect and happy to work with him in the group. You could say the guy becomes Ted's fan and really wants to be friends, but the other interns keep eyeing him with suspicion. A few days later, Jake and his friends finally invite the newbie to a nightclub to get to know him better. There, the guy manages to bond a bit with the crew, and it seems like Juliet, who's in a relationship with Jake, starts liking Ted too. The next night, Jake takes Ted to a local cheap brothel guarded by a huge black guy. The guy was so drunk he just passed out, but when he got to work the next morning, he found the guard dead. Ted has no memory of what happened that night after he and Jake entered the place. Still, he helps determine the true cause of death. According to his analysis, the guard was first hit with a blunt object, then poisoned. Hours later, the attacker returned, stabbed him several times, and shot him with a gun. Morris thinks the timeline Ted described sounds pretty odd, but he accepts his version and sends the guard for further examination. That evening, Jake takes Ted to the basement, where the newbie immediately figures out Jake killed the guard, and Jake doesn't deny it. Instead, he says it's some kind of logic game. He claims the guy deserved to die. He was an ex-con who brought no good to society. Jake explains the game is super complex. The harder the cause of death, the more interesting it is to diagnose. Jake invites the newbie to join, but Ted refuses, saying he's going to tell the cops. But Jake assures him if he does, Ted will end up on trial too, since he was at the crime scene, and Jake made sure to leave evidence against him. The next day, Juliet asks Ted to join them. She gives him a piece of paper with a patient's room number, a man who killed his own family and then tried to harm himself. Without thinking too long, Ted decides to punish him since the guy's condition is critical and he's going to die anyway. The guy commits the crime in a way that's hard for Jake and the others to figure out the cause of death. After his first crime, Ted feels pretty bad, to put it mildly, but Jake helps him deal with the guilt. Then they head to the basement, and the guy officially joins the game with Jake, Juliet, Griffin, Ivy, and Chip. While Ted rests, the group tries to determine the cause of death. The next day, Juliet takes Ted to her father's house and tells him he abused her as a child. She asks the guy to help her with the murder, since it's her turn to lead. The pair enters the man's house and disposes of him using liquid nitrogen. Then, in a burst of passion, they make love. A few days later, the game begins, and the group quickly figures out the cause. Jake realizes Juliet had help from the newbie, and he tells him the man they killed wasn't her father. Furious, Ted demands an explanation from Juliet, and she says the guy was just some random dude. Ted's pissed at her, thinking she used him. The game continues, and the crimes they commit get more insane as they're increasingly obsessed with pulling off the most complex murder, and they target completely random, unrelated people. In the meantime, Ted and Juliet grow closer and keep sleeping together, even though they're supposedly still in relationships with their partners. A while later, Ted heads home for the holidays. Gwen is thrilled to finally see her fiancé. Her father is proud of Ted's achievements and promises him a job at the best company, whether he marries his daughter or not. That night, Gwen tells the guy she's wrapped up all her affairs and can go with him this time. When they arrive at his place, the girl notices a vial of vitamins. But the guy deftly dodges the topic, saying it belongs to his friend. That evening, they head to a party where Gwen meets Ted's colleagues. Juliet openly shows her jealousy toward the guy, which Jake notices, leading to a fight between them. That night, Jake calls Ted and asks him to come to the morgue. There, he learns the guy snapped and killed 3 girls. Ted starts scolding him like a child, making Jake even angrier. To distract the raging guy, Ted starts the game and correctly guesses the cause of death for all the women. Then, near his house, Ted runs into Juliet. She says she broke up with Jake to be with him, but Ted sends her away, saying he loves his girlfriend. Upset, Juliet leaves, but right then Jake spots them. The next day, Ted says he wants out of the game, but Jake tells him that's impossible and suggests discussing it at a group meeting that evening. But without the so-called friends knowing, Ted prepares a plan to exit the game, and a few hours later, everyone except Ted gathers in the basement around the table, where to their surprise lies Juliet, killed by Jake. As they prepare for the game, they realize the room is filled with gas, but it's too late, and a massive explosion goes off. Turns out Ted planned to take out the whole group at once to end the game. The next day, the guy comes to work and learns from Morris that 4 interns died in the basement, though with Juliet, it should have been 5. Ted immediately realizes Jake might be alive, and Gwen could be in danger. And sure enough, Jake visits Ted's fiancée after the explosion. A while later, the guy returns home and, to his horror, finds Gwen already dead. Morris expresses his condolences and says they'll have to do an autopsy to determine the cause of Gwen's death. Ted insists on doing it himself. Morris also mentions the police have started investigating the basement incident and suspect Jake, who disappeared after the explosion. Until late at night, the guy examines Gwen's body. After he's left alone in the lab, Jake suddenly attacks him. He's furious at Ted not for trying to kill him, but because the autopsy results for Gwen were completely inaccurate, making it look like a simple heart attack. But according to Jake, killing Gwen was his greatest masterpiece ever. Jake thinks he's the winner, but it turns out Ted deliberately faked the autopsy results for Gwen's family so they wouldn't know their daughter was murdered. And Ted himself calmly figured out exactly how Jake finished off his girl. Then it turns out Ted conspired with Ben to eliminate Jake the same way he did Gwen. First, they fully paralyzed him, then injected potassium cyanide into his vein, and after that, a few drops of nitroglycerin. The dying process takes at least 7 minutes, and in that state, the person feels and understands everything that's happening. So while Jake is still alive, Ben and Ted start the autopsy, knowing how torturous it is. And that's where Pathology ends. If you're into anatomy or Dexter-style stuff, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Solid, but not for rewatches.